A thick morning fog clings to the quiet streets of Claymore, Ohio. The town square sits frozen in time, rusted swing sets creak in the distance, and rows of shuttered shops look out like forgotten watchers. An old lamppost flickers overhead. Tacked to a weather-worn bulletin board are 3 faded flyers. Their edges are torn. The ink is smudged from 2 decades of sun, rain, and grief. But the names are still legible. Tyler Reese, age 11. Miguel Carter, age 12. Chase Dunning, age 13. 3 best friends. Gone on the same October afternoon in 2005. Last seen riding their bikes past the school parking lot. Never seen again. The flyers flutter gently in the wind, like ghosts refusing to leave. For 20 years this town whispered the same 3 names. 3 boys who vanished without a trace on their way home from school. No bodies. No clues. No hope. Claymore learned to live with unanswered questions. Or at least it pretended to. Until yesterday. He picks up. What he hears silences the room. We're alive. Don't tell them we called. That was all they said. 5 words. But those 5 words flipped the case upside down, and reopened a wound this town tried to bury. FBI confirms tip in 20-year missing children case. Are the Claymore boys still alive? Secret shelter discovered after mysterious call. The town square, once still, is now filled with satellite trucks, camera crews, and desperate neighbors clutching old photographs. Everyone wants answers. But no one is ready for the truth. Because when the FBI opened the hatch on that forgotten storm shelter outside town, they didn't just find out where the boys had been. They found out what had been done to them. Subscribe now if you love unraveling dark secrets that were buried for decades. Because this one has a truth darker than anyone imagined. Claymore, Ohio. October 17, 2003. The final bell rang, echoing down the long, tiled hallway of Claymore Middle School. Lockers slammed shut like a line of dominoes. Backpacks swung over shoulders. Laughter and shouts filled the corridor as kids spilled out into the afternoon light. Through the crowded exit, 3 boys emerged together. Tyler Reese, Miguel Carter, and Chase Dunning. They weren't just classmates. They were inseparable. Every teacher knew it. Every parent knew it. Even the janitor called them the trio. Tyler, the youngest at 11, had a nervous smile and carried a sketchpad everywhere he went. Miguel, 12, wore his father's old army jacket even though it dragged down past his knees. Chase, 13, was the tall one, fast-talking, full of pranks, but fiercely protective of the other 2. They lived just 6 blocks apart and rode their bikes together every single day. It was routine, school, corner store, then home. That Friday afternoon was no different. Except it was. The sun hung low as the boys pedaled toward the edge of town. Leaves crunched beneath their tires. They took their usual shortcut, a dirt path behind Miller's farm, bordered on one side by a tall cornfield and on the other by the treeline of Monroe Woods. They joked. They raced. Tyler tried to ride with no hands and nearly tipped over. Miguel teased him. Chase laughed so hard he had to stop pedaling. For a moment life was just that, light and harmless. Then they disappeared. By 6:30 p.m. the first call came in. Tyler's mother, Diane Reese, hadn't heard from her son. By 7:15, Miguel's older sister was pacing the front yard with a flashlight. At 8 o'clock, Chase's dad, a mechanic named Ron Dunning, drove down every alley in town with his high beams on. By midnight, search teams were in the woods. Dogs barked. Helicopters circled. The boys' names echoed through the trees. At sunrise, authorities found 3 bikes in a drainage ditch on the edge of the forest. No blood. No clothing. No signs of a struggle. Just silence. The FBI stepped in by day 3. The boys' faces were broadcast on national television. Agents interviewed every classmate, every bus driver, every neighbor. The entire town was placed under a quiet but suffocating suspicion. But there was no break. Not even a whisper. The cornfield yielded nothing. The woods offered dead ends. No camera footage. No tire marks. No footprints past the ditch. It was like they had vanished into air. Weeks passed. Then months. Flyers turned yellow. The town started to change. Claymore lost its rhythm. People moved away, businesses closed early, and Halloween was canceled that year. Conspiracy theories began to swirl. Some blamed a drifter seen near the woods that week. Others whispered about a former science teacher who kept to himself and lived off-grid. A few locals were convinced a cult had taken them. The same cult blamed for animal sacrifices found 2 towns over. But there was no proof. Just fear. More troubling were the rumors that never left the bar stools, that someone in town knew what happened. that maybe it wasn't a stranger, that maybe it had been covered up. The media frenzy didn't last. The FBI's presence faded after the first year. What remained was pain. Diane Reese kept setting the table for 4 every night. She refused to let anyone sit in Tyler's chair. His room stayed untouched. She even changed the batteries in his Game Boy once a month in case he came home and wanted to play. Miguel's family moved to Florida 2 years later. His mother, unable to bear the town's silence, suffered a nervous breakdown. His sister stopped speaking for months. Chase's father, Ron, took it the hardest. He drank. Then he drank more. Eventually he closed his garage. Neighbors saw him outside once a week, muttering to himself as he stared at the trees behind his home. He was found in his truck 3 years after the boys vanished. Engine running, garage door closed. The coroner called it carbon monoxide poisoning. The sheriff called it a broken heart. Time passed but the wound never healed. Every October, someone still left 3 white candles on the steps of Claymore Middle School. No one ever saw who did it. Local kids learned not to go near the woods. Parents warned them with hushed tones, "Don't take the path behind the farm." That's where the boys were taken. But slowly the town moved on. Not out of peace but exhaustion. Then came the knock. 20 years later, the Claymore Sheriff's Office received an unexpected call from an FBI office across the country. Someone had dialed 911 from a prepaid burner phone. The call lasted 7 seconds. "We're alive. Don't tell them we called." Then silence. The number pinged near the Nevada desert. Authorities searched the coordinates. What they found would unravel 2 decades of lies, and reveal the chilling truth of where the boys had been all along. February 2025. Las Vegas, Nevada. FBI Field Office, 3:14 a.m. The building buzzed with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the click of keyboards. Most desks sat empty, the quiet hours between night and dawn offering little activity. Agent Claire Weller sat at her station, reviewing outdated case files on interstate disappearances. Her phone lit up. A restricted number. She answered. The voice on the other end was low, unsteady. A man perhaps in his late 20s. He gave no name, no explanation. Only a location. Belridge Farm. East Side. Storm shelter. The call ended. Claire paused. Something about the tone, detached, worn down, stirred her instincts. She keyed in the coordinates. A remote property outside Elko, Nevada. Long abandoned. The farm had been seized a decade prior for unpaid taxes. No known activity. No surveillance. She flagged the tip. By sunrise a team was en route. The drive to Belridge took over an hour. The land was barren, dry, dust-choked and eerily quiet. Barbed wire curled around rusting fence posts. A crumbling farmhouse leaned to one side, beaten down by decades of neglect. Agents fanned out across the property, careful not to disturb anything. On the eastern edge, behind a dilapidated barn, they found it. A concrete slab with iron handles, buried under weathered debris. The entrance was chained shut from the outside. The links were old but intact. As if someone wanted to lock something in, not out. With bolt cutters the agents severed the chain. The door creaked open, groaning under years of rust. A rank stench rushed out, sour air trapped below the surface for who knows how long. The descent into the shelter was narrow and steep. Flashlights pierced the dark, revealing cramped walls and concrete floors. Dust floated like ash in the beam's glow. But what they found wasn't the ruin of an old bunker. It was lived in. Fresh footprints in the dirt. Water bottles, some half full. Wrappers from canned meals. A tattered Bible left open on the floor. Stacks of books. Manuals on wilderness survival, worn-out school textbooks, hand-copied journals and spiral notebooks. Then they saw the mattress. Or rather, what was under it. Hidden beneath its rotting foam was a wooden trapdoor, bolted shut with homemade locks and steel brackets. With calculated precision they removed the fasteners and opened it. Another chamber lay beneath. Here the space was tighter. The air colder. The walls bore deep gouges, scratches in the concrete made by desperate hands. Marks counted in sets of 5. Hundreds, maybe thousands. A line of empty food tins sat in the corner. A portable light, long dead, rested on a crate. There were drawings on the walls, some childlike, others disturbingly intricate. A calendar scratched directly onto the surface. Dates tallied from 2004 to 2024. And then, in the center, pinned to the wall with a rusted fork. A hand-drawn map. Rough outlines. Roads. Forests, rivers. Places marked with strange symbols. In red ink across the top, one phrase. 1991 to 2024, The Path Home. CNN. Authorities confirm 3 missing children from Claymore, Ohio, presumed dead since 2003, have been discovered alive in Nevada. NBC. The boys, now adults, were found living underground in an abandoned farm shelter. FBI officials call the case unprecedented. Local Ohio station. Tyler Reese, Miguel Carter and Chase Dunning, the Claymore 3, are finally coming home. But not in the way anyone expected. The press exploded. The story eclipsed headlines nationwide. Talk shows, podcasts, morning programs, everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted the miracle explained. But what emerged from the investigation disturbed even the most seasoned agents. The 3 men, now aged 33, 34 and 35, were taken into federal custody for medical evaluations and questioning. They had no IDs, no digital footprint, no connection to the outside world in over 2 decades. Their appearances were worn, malnourished, pale from years underground, beards unkempt. But their eyes said everything. Wanted, hollow, suspicious of everyone. And worst of all, they didn't want to be rescued. When interviewed, Chase refused to speak. He turned away from every question, arms folded, lips tight. Tyler wept uncontrollably, muttering phrases in strange, repeated patterns, ritualistic, almost rehearsed. Only Miguel spoke, and even he struggled. He told the agents that they had been taken in by a man they referred to only as Father. That Father had saved them from the poisoned world. That above ground was lost. That the surface burns. The boys had grown up believing the outside was a graveyard. That war had ended civilization. That the government had lied. That families were dead. And that survival meant obedience. When pressed on Father's identity, Miguel flinched. He told us not to say, he whispered. Not to tell anyone. Or we'd bring the fire back. He claimed they tried escaping once. Chase got caught. We didn't try again. The truth unraveled slowly. Father had been their captor. Their indoctrinator. A man who had fed them misinformation for 2 decades. Taught them that the end had come. That the people looking for them were imposters. That everything beyond the shelter was evil. He wasn't just a stranger. He had roots in Claymore. A man no one suspected. A man once trusted. And somehow he had transported the boys over 1,800 miles, without being noticed. Kept them hidden under plain sight. Raised them like sons, controlled them like prisoners. Now even with the chains gone, they feared freedom. Tyler refused to eat food he hadn't blessed. Chase asked to return underground. Miguel slept curled on the floor of his holding cell, whispering verses that didn't exist in any holy book. Doctors said it would take years, if ever, for them to accept reality. They had been denied childhood, denied family, denied choice. Now even truth felt like a trap. Claymore didn't know how to react. Some celebrated. Others wept. A few refused to believe it was really them. 20 years had passed. Faces changed. Memories blurred. But DNA matched. They were the boys. That wasn't the question. The real mystery wasn't where they had gone. It was what they had been told while they were gone, and why they believed it. FBI Safe House, March 2025. Inside a secured room lined with soundproof walls and two-way glass, Miguel Carter sat across from federal agents. His eyes darted between their faces, unsure who to trust. Every few minutes, he would press his palms against the table, as if confirming it was real, not part of the dream Father always warned them about. For days, Miguel had refused to speak in full sentences. But now, under protective custody with no contact from Chase or Tyler, he began to unravel the truth buried for decades. It wasn't just a kidnapping. It was indoctrination. According to Miguel, it began the moment they were taken. Not hours later, not days. Immediately. Back in 2003, they were led through the woods by a man in uniform, someone the boys had seen around Claymore before. A local sheriff's deputy. Kind face. Calm voice. The type children didn't run from. He said they were in danger. That something had happened in town. That he had to take them somewhere safe. Now. They followed. The journey was long. Blindfolds. Closed windows. Stops only for food and water. They were underground before they realized they weren't going home. The next morning the stories began. He called himself Father. He wore no badge, no uniform, no nameplate. But his authority was absolute. He told them their town was gone. That Claymore had been bombed in a second wave of attacks after September 11th. That radiation had poisoned the rivers. That the people on TV were digital illusions created by the government to lure survivors into death camps. They were told their parents didn't make it. They were told the world had ended in 2004. And they believed it, because they were children. Scared, disoriented, and desperate for protection. Father wasn't alone. There were others underground, men and women dressed in hand-sewn garments, living off dry food rations and rain-caught water. They called themselves the Chosen. They spoke in rehearsed phrases. They never smiled. They punished doubt with silence and food deprivation. The boys were renamed. Tyler became Ash. Chase was Iron. Miguel was Flint. Every night, they were given sermons about the surface, how the sky demons burned flesh, how false prophets ruled the cities, how stepping outside meant death. They were shown doctored footage, explosions, clouds of ash, melting skin. Scenes edited from old war films and survival propaganda. They didn't know the difference. Father rewrote their reality, and they accepted it. Years passed. The bunker became home. Miguel said they were taught to hunt rats, to dig side tunnels, to fight in darkness, to read Father's scripture, a mix of survivalist jargon and twisted doctrine. They were never allowed daylight. When Miguel turned 16, he asked about the past. His parents. His sister. Father took him into a separate room and left him there for 3 days. No food. No water. No sound. When the door finally opened, Father smiled and asked if he was ready to let go of the world that abandoned him. Miguel nodded. He didn't ask again. But something changed last winter. An earthquake struck the region, minor on the surface, but strong enough to fracture part of the bunker's structure. A tunnel collapsed. Supplies were destroyed. One member of the cult was killed instantly. With walls cracking and food low, Father panicked. He told the boys that judgment was near, that the surface had found them, that demons were knocking. Miguel started to doubt. And this time he didn't bury the thought. One night, he stole into the tunnel chamber with a makeshift crowbar and forced open a maintenance hatch. The others were asleep. He climbed for hours, crawling through dirt-filled shafts, emerging into the open for the first time in over 2 decades. His legs gave out. His lungs gasped in disbelief. The stars, he had forgotten they were real. He wandered for 3 days, terrified, disoriented, avoiding headlights and strangers. The lies had rooted too deep. It took him 2 more weeks to gather the courage to speak to anyone. Even then, the call he made to the FBI almost never happened. Because he still feared what would happen to the others. Miguel explained that Tyler and Chase didn't want to leave. They had spent too long below. They believed he had been infected. That he would bring destruction back to them. Chase especially had changed. Hardened. Loyal to Father's voice, even after it had stopped echoing through the halls. Miguel tried to convince them to come with him. They refused. He escaped anyway. And when agents returned to the shelter weeks later, Tyler and Chase had gone. But the final blow came during the background investigation. The identity of Father. Fingerprint matches confirmed the horrifying truth. Robert Ellison. Retired sheriff. Led officer in the Claymore search team back in 2003. The same man who gave interviews, walked side by side with the grieving families and publicly declared, "We won't stop looking." He was the last person seen near the woods the day the boys disappeared. He had volunteered for every search party. He had stood in Tyler's living room, hugged Miguel's mother, helped Chase's dad staple flyers to phone poles. And all along he knew. When agents searched Ellison's last known residence, they found maps of Claymore with markings. Diaries filled with paranoid delusions. Newspaper clippings of the missing boys. Photos of the bunker's construction dating back to 1997. The man had planned it for years. He retired in 2004. Disappeared weeks later. Neighbors assumed he'd moved west. No one asked why. Now his name is whispered in every home across Claymore. Not with hate. With disbelief. Miguel still wakes up screaming. He paces the room at night, checking windows, murmuring prayers Father taught them. Part of him still wonders if this freedom is just another trick. Chase hasn't been found. Tyler is in psychiatric care, refusing to speak to anyone outside his assigned therapist. The surface to them is a fantasy. And reality, a threat. What happened in that bunker wasn't just captivity. It was the construction of an alternate world. One where fear ruled and truth died. And the hardest part? They believed it. Every word. Claymore, Ohio, early spring 2025. The town never imagined it would welcome them home. Not in this way. Not after 22 years of silence. Not after burying hope alongside the sleepless nights. But now Claymore was different. The storefronts looked older. Familiar houses bore new names. The school the boys once attended had been turned into a hardware outlet. Yet, when the black SUVs pulled into town with tinted windows and tight security, time bent backward, if only for a moment. People stepped outside. Mothers clutched their children. Some wept openly. Others watched in stunned disbelief. The boys, now men, stepped onto soil they had forgotten. Miguel held himself tight, his coat zipped all the way to the neck despite the warming weather. His eyes scanned every shadow like it might speak. Beside him, Tyler stared down at the pavement, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. And Chase? Chase kept his hands buried deep in his sleeves, his face expressionless. They didn't speak. They just stood there, breathing air that once carried their names as rumors, now echoing them in reverence. The families gathered slowly, uncertain of the moment. Miguel's mother, Rosario, looked older, but her hands trembled as if holding him as a baby again. She approached first, no words, just tears falling freely. He didn't hug her at first. He flinched. But then, gently, her touch reached through the years of absence. He leaned into her arms. Tyler's older brother, Jacob, stood back. He'd been a teenager when it happened. Now he had children of his own. His eyes glossed over when he saw his brother's face, not the boy he remembered, but something fragile, haunted. Tyler didn't speak. He only asked quietly, "Can we go back underground now?" No one had an answer. Chase's aunt, the only living relative willing to come, broke down the moment she saw him. But Chase didn't react. He kept his distance. No embrace. No eye contact. Just stillness, like he hadn't yet stepped out of the bunker in his mind. The town held a vigil that night. Candlelight glowed across the square. Old classmates, now grown, placed photos and teddy bears beneath a statue erected in their honor years ago, a memorial that was never supposed to be visited by its subjects. The entire community had mourned them. Now no one knew how to begin the process of welcoming them back. Not because they weren't wanted, but because they were broken. News of the sheriff's identity had already gone public. And so had his fate. Before authorities could serve the warrant for his arrest, Robert Ellison, the man once trusted to protect Claymore, was found dead in a remote cabin outside Reno. A single bullet to the head. No note. Just a file box filled with VHS tapes, pages of religious rambling, and old photographs of the boys playing near the cornfield. Photos taken without their knowledge. His death ended the legal process, but not the pain. Not the betrayal. The man had dined in their homes. Delivered speeches at their vigils. He had searched with them. Cried with them. All while hiding the very boys they begged to find. Miguel was the first to begin adapting. Therapy sessions became daily rituals. He scribbled his thoughts in notebooks and read aloud from books that had once been forbidden. He asked questions. Hundreds of them. He struggled with supermarkets. He panicked in elevators. He cried when he saw birds flying overhead, not because he feared them but because he had forgotten what freedom looked like. Yet, step by step, he reclaimed fragments of who he had once been. Tyler took longer. He refused to eat food he hadn't prepared. Slept in closets with the lights off. Rejected every effort to reintroduce him to the outside world. When taken to a therapist's office with glass windows, he asked if they could be covered in blankets. When told he could go for a walk, he asked if it was safe from watchers. He kept trying to dig small holes in the garden at the group home, not to escape but to make room in case they needed to go back. Back to silence. Back to safety. Back to the bunker that had become the only place he ever understood. Chase was the quietest of all. He never spoke publicly. Never made eye contact. He flinched when people touched him, refused to sign any documents, and spent most of his time tracing shapes into dust on windowsills. Therapists called it protective withdrawal. Family called it trauma. He called it nothing. And maybe that silence said more than any words could. But for all the pain, there were moments of grace. When Miguel visited the playground near his old school and watched kids running free, he smiled. When Tyler heard his real name spoken gently without fear, he blinked slowly and whispered, "Tyler? I think I remember." When a teacher from 2003 sent Miguel a letter with his old homework attached, AB+ in spelling, he cried for 30 minutes. Not because he failed, but because someone had kept that memory alive. The media moved on. Other stories filled headlines. But Claymore didn't forget. Each of the boys was gifted a memorial scholarship in their name, not for college but for healing. A trust fund, funded by donations from across the country, ensured they would never need to work if they weren't ready. A mural was painted downtown, the three boys in the sunlight, holding hands, walking toward an open field. Above them the words, From the shadows, into the light. The journey to recovery won't be easy. For any of them. There will be days Miguel wakes up sweating, unsure if the sky is real. There will be nights Tyler asks to return to the safety of 4 concrete walls. There may never come a time Chase tells the full story. But they're here. They survived. They exist, not as names on a plaque or unsolved mysteries, but as living proof that even after 20 years underground, the soul still reaches for the sky. For 2 decades they were shadows. Now they walk in the light.